If you walk into an old-growth forest and stand perfectly still, your immediate impression is one of peace. The trees seem solid, immovable, and silent. We look at a forest and we see scenery. We see a passive backdrop to the real action of animal life. But this silence is a trick of our perception. It is a cognitive error caused by the difference in our timescales. We are fast creatures. Plants are slow creatures. Because we move at different speeds, we are blind to their reality. But if you were to speed up time, if you could perceive the world through the lens of a time-lapse camera, that peaceful forest would vanish. In its place, you would see a battlefield. You would see a frantic, crowded marketplace. You would see a desperate wrestling match for light and space. The truth is, the world around us is not silent. It is deafeningly loud with biological data. Right now, beneath your feet, there are electrical signals speeding through the roots. Above your head, invisible chemical warnings are drifting on the wind. Plants are fighting, trading, hunting, and communicating. They are not objects. They are slow-motion animals that have solved the problem of survival without a brain. Tonight, we are going to decode their language. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who is joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Biologists have a name for our inability to truly see the vegetation around us: plant blindness. We tend to group plants with rocks or the weather as part of the environment rather than living actors within it. This is because our brains are hardwired to detect movement. A tiger in the grass grabs our attention. The grass itself does not. But plants are not statues. They are in constant motion. A young sunflower tracks the sun across the sky with the precision of a radar dish, resetting itself to the east every night to catch the dawn. A climbing vine whips its tendrils in circles, searching for a hold like a blind man with a cane. When it touches a support, it reacts instantly, coiling and hardening to pull itself up. This is not a passive reaction, it is a hunt for light. The plant is calculating the most efficient path to energy. We miss this drama simply because we live too fast to see it. The fundamental difference between animals and plants is not intelligence, it is architecture. About 2 billion years ago, our ancestors diverged. Animals chose the path of movement. When we face a threat, predators, fire, or cold, we run, we escape. Because we can move, we can afford to be somewhat oblivious to the subtle changes in our environment. Plants chose the other path. They are sessile. They are rooted. They cannot run. They cannot hide. A tree must stand its ground and endure everything the universe throws at it. This constraint is the driving force behind their sensory evolution. Because they cannot escape, they must be infinitely more aware of their surroundings than we are. A creature that cannot flee must be able to sense danger long before it arrives. It must detect the chemical signature of an insect's saliva, the humidity of the air, the vibration of a wing, and the shadow of a neighbor. Their lack of movement forced them to become the ultimate observers of the earth. We navigate the world using 5 primary senses: sight, hearing, touch, smell, and taste. We assume this is the standard toolkit for life, but plants have far surpassed us. Botanists have identified at least 15 distinct senses in the plant kingdom, and potentially many more. They have a form of sight. Photoreceptors cover their entire bodies, allowing them to distinguish between red and blue light, and even see ultraviolet and infrared wavelengths that are invisible to us. They have a sense of touch so delicate they can feel the weight of a single thread of spider silk. They possess proprioception, A plant knows exactly where its branches are in three-dimensional space, ensuring they don't grow into each other. They sense gravity, electromagnetic fields, and humidity gradients. They taste the soil, identifying distinct mineral veins and the chemical signatures of friends and foes. While we look out at the world, they are absorbing it through every cell. In the late 1960s, the study of plant behavior took a strange, controversial turn that blurred the line between science and science fiction. It began with Cleve Baxter, an interrogation specialist for the CIA and a leading expert on the polygraph, the lie detector machine. Baxter was not a biologist. He was a man who studied stress responses. One night in 1966, working late in his New York office, he decided on a whim to hook the electrodes of his polygraph to the leaf of a Dracaena plant in the corner of the room. He wanted to see if the plant would react to being watered. The machine registered nothing significant. Then, Baxter thought about threatening the plant. He decided he would burn the leaf with a match. He didn't strike a match. He didn't move. He simply formed the intent in his mind. According to Baxter, at the exact moment he thought about the fire, the polygraph needle jumped. It drew a frantic spike, a pattern identical to human fear. Baxter published his findings claiming that plants possessed primary perception, a form of telepathy that allowed them to read thoughts and feel the death of other organisms. He claimed plants reacted when shrimp were dropped into boiling water in the next room. The public was captivated. The book, The Secret Life of Plants, became a bestseller. People began talking to their ferns and playing classical music to their begonias, but science demands reproducibility, and here the theory collapsed. When controlled experiments were run by botanists, blocking out electromagnetic interference and vibrations, the telepathy vanished. The plants did not read minds. The scientific community rejected the Baxter effect as pseudoscience. However, this rejection had an unintended consequence. It pushed the study of plant behavior into the shadows for decades. Serious scientists were afraid to study plant intelligence for fear of being associated with the CIA polygraph experiments. It took 40 years for the field to recover, and when it did, the answers they found were not paranormal, but biological and far more complex than telepathy. Long before the CIA experiments, Charles Darwin, the father of evolutionary theory, had already suspected that plants possessed a form of agency. Near the end of his life, he turned his attention away from animals and towards the movement of roots. In his final book, The Power of Movement in Plants, Darwin proposed a hypothesis that was radical for 1880 and remains controversial today. He suggested that the tip of the root acts exactly like the brain of a lower animal. Darwin observed that the root tip, a tiny cluster of cells at the very end of the root cap, is the command center. It navigates the soil with intention. It senses gravity, moisture, pressure, and chemical gradients simultaneously. If it hits a rock, it doesn't just stop. It calculates the most efficient path around it. Darwin argued that this tiny organ receives sensory data and directs the movement of the entire organism. For over a century, this idea was largely ignored by mainstream botany. But today, modern microscopy has revealed that the root tip is indeed a hub of electrical activity, firing signals that look remarkably like the impulses in a nervous system. The brain is not in the head, it is in the feet. To see this intelligence in action, we must look at the work of Professor Stefano Mancuso at the International Laboratory of Plant Neurobiology in Florence. Mancuso designed an experiment to test whether plants could perceive objects they weren't touching. He placed a climbing bean plant in a pot and set a support pole a few inches away. He then filmed the plant's growth. In the time-lapse footage, the bean plant did not flail around randomly, hoping to hit something. It grew straight toward the pole. It seemed to know exactly where the support was located in three-dimensional space. But here is the mystery. The plant has no eyes. It was not touching the pole. How did it locate an object across a gap of empty air? Mancuso and his team hypothesize that plants may use a form of biological echolocation, or perhaps they are sensitive to the minute distortions in the electromagnetic field caused by the pole. Whatever the mechanism, the plant demonstrated a sense of spatial awareness that defies our current understanding of biology. It hunted for the support with the precision of a predator stalking prey. When we look at a tree, we see a single, solid individual, but if we could strip away the soil, we would see the true architecture of the plant mind. The root system of a single mature tree can stretch for hundreds of miles if laid end to end. It possesses millions of root tips, millions of tiny brain centers, all working in concert. This is not a centralized intelligence like ours, housed in a skull. It is a distributed intelligence. Each root tip collects local data. Is there water here? Is there poison there? Is this a friend or a foe? And sends that information back up the line using electrical signals and chemical neurotransmitters. These are the same chemicals, like glutamate and serotonin, found in the human brain. The plant processes this massive, simultaneous stream of data to make complex decisions about where to grow and how to allocate resources. It is a network intelligence, robust and redundant, capable of losing 90% of its brain, the roots, and still functioning perfectly. This decentralized structure suggests that a plant behaves less like a single animal and more like a colony. Biologists are now applying the concept of swarm intelligence to plants, the same logic used to describe a hive of bees or a flock of birds. A single root tip is not smart, just as a single bee is not smart. But the collective behavior of millions of root tips creates a sophisticated, emergent intelligence. When a root system encounters a patch of nutrient-rich soil, the individual tips signal the rest of the network. The plant shifts its growth energy to that specific sector, exploiting the resource with military precision. Conversely, if a root encounters a toxic substance, it signals a retreat, and the entire network adjusts its path. There is no general giving orders. The intelligence arises from the interaction of the parts. This makes plants incredibly resilient. You can cut a branch or sever a root, and the swarm adapts instantly. They are fluid, modular beings that solve problems through the sheer statistical power of their millions of sensing units. We often overlook the sheer physical impossibility of a tree. Consider the giant sequoia or the coast redwood, titans that grow to over 100 meters in height. Every day, these trees must move hundreds of gallons of water from the soil to the highest needles at the very top. In human engineering, moving water up 30 stories requires massive, noisy, high-pressure pumps, fueled by electricity or diesel. But a tree has no moving parts. It has no heart to pump blood. It makes no sound. Yet inside the trunk of every tree, there is a river flowing upwards, defying gravity with silent, relentless force. This feat relies on a property of water that we rarely notice, its stickiness. Water molecules are attracted to each other. They hold hands. Inside the microscopic tubes of the tree's xylem, the wood itself, water forms a continuous, unbroken chain that stretches from the deepest root hair all the way up to the highest leaf. It is like a taut rope made of liquid. The tree does not push the water up from the bottom, it pulls it from the top. The engine of this system is the sun. As sunlight hits the leaves, water evaporates from the tiny pores called stomata. This is transpiration. As one molecule of water evaporates into the air, it exerts a microscopic tug on the molecule behind it. Because the water molecules are bonded together, this tug is transmitted down the entire chain, through the twig, down the branch, down the trunk, and into the roots. This creates a state of massive negative pressure, tension. The tree is essentially sucking water out of the ground using the power of evaporation. The tension inside the xylem of a tall tree is immense, far greater than the pressure in a car tire, but in reverse. It is a physical state so extreme that it teeters on the edge of stability. The tree is living on a knife edge of physics, holding onto a column of water that desperately wants to fall back down to Earth. But this system has a deadly flaw. If the tension becomes too great, during a severe drought, for example, when the soil is dry and the sun is hot, the water chain can snap. The bond between the molecules breaks. When this happens, the liquid water instantly vaporizes into a gas, forming an air bubble inside the tube. To a biologist, this is known as cavitation. To a doctor, it would be an embolism. It is a plant heart attack. The air bubble acts like a plug, blocking the flow of water in that specific tube forever. If enough of these vessels cavitate, the hydraulic system fails, the leaves wither, and the branch dies. The tree is fighting a constant, silent battle against the physics of vacuum, trying to keep its water columns intact while extracting every drop of moisture from the drying soil. For centuries, we believed this internal struggle was silent, but in 2023, researchers at Tel Aviv University made a startling discovery. They placed ultrasonic microphones next to tomato and tobacco plants that were deprived of water. They found that as the plants dehydrated, they began to make noise. They emitted sharp, rapid-fire clicking sounds, like the popping of bubble wrap. These clicks are not a vocalization. They are the acoustic signature of catastrophe. It is the sound of the water columns snapping. It is the physical shockwave of cavitation occurring inside the stem. A healthy plant is quiet, but a thirsty plant screams. It clicks dozens of times an hour, broadcasting its distress at a frequency that humans cannot hear, but which other animals, and perhaps other plants, can detect. The forest during a drought is not silent. It is a cacophony of popping vessels, a chorus of thirst ringing out in the ultrasonic spectrum. Plants do not have vocal cords. They cannot shout, whisper, or sing, but they have a vocabulary far richer and more precise than our own spoken language. Their words are molecules. They speak in chemistry. To a plant, the air is not just empty space. It is a billboard, a fiber optic cable, and a warning siren all at once. They release complex cocktails of volatile organic compounds into the wind, invisible clouds of scent that carry specific, urgent information. We often think of scents, the smell of a rose or a pine tree, as accidental byproducts or simple attractants for pollinators. But this is only the surface. The chemical language of plants is a dense, encrypted code. They can synthesize thousands of different compounds, mixing them to create specific messages. There is a scent for "I am thirsty." There is a scent for "I am under attack by a fungus." There is a scent for "I am under attack by an insect." These signals drift through the forest, inhaled by the stomata of neighboring plants, decoding the news of the world without a sound ever being made. One of the most striking examples of this conversation happens on the hot savannas of Africa. The umbrella thorn acacia is the favorite food of the giraffe. But the tree is not a passive victim. When a giraffe starts chewing on the leaves, the injury triggers an immediate reaction. Within minutes, the tree pumps toxic tannins into its leaves, making them bitter and indigestible. If the giraffe continues to eat, the toxins can become lethal. But the tree does not stop there. It warns its neighbors. At the moment of the attack, the injured acacia releases a puff of ethylene gas. This gas is light. It travels quickly on the wind. When the neighboring acacias downwind detect this ethylene, they do not wait to be bitten. They immediately begin to pump tannins into their own leaves. They raise their shields before the enemy arrives. The giraffe knows this. Observers have noticed that giraffes will often browse upwind, moving toward trees that have not yet heard the news, or they will walk miles to find a grove that is out of earshot of the alarm. It is a strategic game of hide and seek played with invisible gas. The language of plants is not limited to talking to other plants. They can also talk to animals. In the laboratories of chemical ecologist Ted Turlings, a remarkable discovery was made involving the humble corn plant. When a corn stalk is attacked by a specific type of caterpillar, the beet armyworm, the plant does something that borders on military strategy. It tastes the attacker. The plant analyzes the chemical composition of the caterpillar's saliva. It identifies the specific species that is eating it, and then it calls for air support. The corn releases a specific blend of scents, terpenoids, that acts as a beacon. This scent does not repel the caterpillar. It calls the caterpillar's worst nightmare, the parasitic wasp, Cotesia marginiventris. The wasp detects the distress signal from miles away, flies directly to the specific plant, and lays its eggs inside the caterpillar, eating it from the inside out. The plant has hired a bodyguard. It has signaled, "The enemy of my enemy is my friend." It is a level of interspecies manipulation that suggests a deep, calculated awareness of the food web. This chemical warfare extends into the dark earth as well. Roots are blind, but they are not helpless. When the roots of a plant are attacked by the larvae of the corn rootworm beetle, the plant cannot call for a wasp. The air is too far away, so it sends a signal through the soil. It releases a chemical called beta-caryophyllene. This molecule diffuses through the moisture between the soil particles. It is a dinner bell for entomopathogenic nematodes, microscopic carnivorous worms that hunt insects. These nematodes pick up the scent trail and swim through the soil directly to the injured roots. They invade the beetle larvae, releasing bacteria that kill the pest within hours, saving the plant. The plant has turned the soil around its roots into a trap, weaponizing the local wildlife to defend its territory. It is a reminder that the plant is the general of a small, vicious army, directing the battle from a command center we cannot see. There is a scent that almost everyone loves, the smell of a freshly mowed lawn on a summer Saturday. We associate it with peace, with suburbia, with the outdoors. But to a biologist, that smell is the smell of trauma. It is a chemical scream. When the blades of the mower slice through the grass, they are causing massive physical trauma to thousands of individual plants simultaneously. The smell is a mix of green leaf volatiles, oxygenated hydrocarbons released from the broken tissues. It is the plant's equivalent of blood in the water. This scent serves two purposes. First, it is an attempt to seal the wounds and prevent bacterial infection, like an antiseptic. Second, it is a distress signal, broadcasting the injury to any plant left standing nearby, telling them to ramp up their defenses and prepare for an attack. We inhale this scent and feel relaxed, completely unaware that we are walking through a cloud of biological panic. Competition in the forest is usually a game of height. Trees race to overtop one another to steal the sunlight, but some plants have chosen a darker strategy. They do not try to outgrow their neighbors, they try to assassinate them. This is the phenomenon of allelopathy, biological chemical warfare. The master of this dark art is the black walnut tree. If you walk through a forest in North America and find a black walnut, look at the ground beneath it. It is often barren. Other plants wither and die within the drip line of its canopy. This is not an accident. The roots of the walnut tree secrete a powerful toxin called juglone. It acts as a respiratory inhibitor for other plants, essentially suffocating them at a cellular level. The tree is salting the earth. It is proactively sterilizing its own territory to ensure that its seedlings have no competition for water or nutrients. It creates a zone of exclusion, a chemical circle of death where only it and a few adapted allies can survive. It is a reminder that the spacing of trees in a forest is not random. It is the result of a silent chemical territorial dispute. In the tropical rainforests, the war for light is even more desperate. Here we meet a killer that kills not with poison but with a slow, crushing embrace. This is the strangler fig. Its life begins in reverse. It does not start in the soil, it starts in the sky. A bird drops a seed onto the high branch of a giant canopy tree. The seed germinates high above the dark forest floor. The young fig sends long, thin roots dangling down through the air, hundreds of feet until they touch the soil. Once anchored, the roots begin to thicken. They begin to fuse. They wrap around the trunk of the host tree, encircling it in a wooden lattice. This is a slow-motion siege. Over decades, the fig roots fuse together to form a solid cylinder, a new trunk surrounding the old one. This casing prevents the host tree from expanding. It squeezes the life out of it, cutting off its circulation while the fig's leaves overtop the host and steal its light. Eventually, the host tree dies and rots away completely. What is left is a ghost tree, a hollow latticed cylinder of fig roots standing on its own, shaped by the memory of the victim it consumed. It is a murder that takes a century to commit. Some plants, realizing they cannot fight alone, have resorted to hiring mercenaries. In the savannas of Central America and Africa, the bullhorn acacia has entered into a military alliance with the pseudo-myrmex ant. The tree provides everything the ant needs. It grows large, hollow thorns that serve as waterproof barracks for the ant colony. It produces nectar from specialized glands, and most remarkably, it grows Beltian bodies, tiny protein-rich nuggets at the tips of its leaves that have no other function than to feed the ants. In exchange for this room and board, the ants provide a standing army. They are hyper-aggressive. If a herbivore, a caterpillar, a goat, or even a giraffe touches the tree, the ants swarm. They deliver painful stings to the nose and mouth of the attacker, driving it away. But they do more than defend, they actively clean. The ants patrol the ground around the trunk, chewing up the seedlings of rival plants. They create a devil's garden, a clear ring around the acacia, where nothing else is allowed to grow. The tree has outsourced its defense and its competition to a colony of six-legged soldiers, paying them in sugar and shelter to maintain its dominance. Perhaps the strangest strategy of all belongs to a plant that hides in plain sight. In the temperate rainforests of Chile, there is a vine called Bocchilla trifoliolata. It is the chameleon of the plant world. Most plants have a fixed leaf shape, determined by their genes. But Bocchilla can change the shape, size, and color of its leaves to match the tree it is climbing. If it climbs a tree with long, thin leaves, the vine produces long, thin leaves. If it crosses over to a tree with broad, serrated leaves, the vine changes its growth pattern to match. It can mimic multiple different trees simultaneously with the same stem. It does this to hide from herbivores, blending into the background foliage. But the mystery is profound. How does it know? The vine does not need to touch the host leaves to copy them. It can mimic a plastic leaf placed nearby. This suggests that the plant has some form of vision. Some scientists hypothesize that the epidermis cells of the leaves act as simple lenses, ocelli, allowing the plant to perceive vague shapes and colors. It is a shapeshifter, a biological spy that navigates the forest by stealing the identity of its neighbors. Beneath the carpet of dead leaves, in the cool, dark soil where our eyes cannot see, lies the true infrastructure of the forest. We used to think of trees as solitary individuals, competing for resources, separated by the soil. We were wrong. The forest is interconnected. It is wired. This is the wood wide web. But the cables of this internet are not made of fiber optics. They are made of fungi. If you were to pick up a single teaspoon of healthy forest soil, you would be holding miles of microscopic, white, thread-like tubes called mycelium. These fungi are not just living in the dirt, they are physically fused to the roots of the trees. It is an ancient, transactional marriage known as mycorrhiza. The deal is simple but vital. The trees are tall, they live in the light, so they are masters of manufacturing sugar from the sun. The fungi live in the dark. They are masters of mining minerals like phosphorus and nitrogen from the rock. So they trade. The fungus pumps water and minerals into the tree, and in exchange, the tree pumps liquid sugar down into the fungus. This is not a casual relationship, it is a lifeline. A tree without this fungal network is deaf, dumb, and starving. The forest stands only because of the invisible white cables that bind the soil together into a single, pulsating economy. This network does more than just trade food, it transmits information and care. Through the groundbreaking work of forest ecologist Suzanne Simard, we now know that the oldest, largest trees in the forest, the mother trees, act as the hubs of this network. They are the matriarchs. Using isotopic tracing, Simard discovered that these giant trees are connected to hundreds of other trees around them, and they use the fungal web to support the community. Crucially, a mother tree can recognize its own kin. It can distinguish its own seedlings from the seedlings of other species. In the deep shade of the forest floor, a young sapling cannot get enough sunlight to photosynthesize effectively. By all rights, it should die, but the mother tree keeps it alive. She pumps excess carbon and sugar through the fungal network, feeding her offspring underground, acting like a biological wet nurse. She keeps them on life support for decades until a gap opens in the canopy and they can finally grow. This shatters the Victorian notion of nature as a pure war of all against all. The forest is also a socialist welfare state, where the rich support the poor and the old protect the young. But any network that carries value will eventually be exploited. The Wood Wide Web has its hackers. In the deep, shadowed corners of the forest, there are plants that have evolved to cheat the system. These are the mycoheterotrophs, plants like the ghost orchid, the coral root, or the snow plant. They are strange, pale, and spectral. They have no chlorophyll. They are not green because they do not photosynthesize. They have abandoned the sun entirely. Instead of making their own food, they tap into the fungal lines. They trick the mycorrhizal network into chemically believing they are trees. They plug into the system and steal the sugar that was being sent from a mighty oak or a Douglas fir to the fungus. They are biological phantoms, living entirely on stolen energy, existing in the dark, fed by the labor of trees they will never touch. They remind us that the underground network is not just a utopian community, it is a vulnerable infrastructure. It is a pipeline that can be tapped, drained, and exploited by those who have cracked the chemical encryption. The most profound function of this network appears when a giant falls. When a great tree is injured, struck by lightning, or simply reaches the end of its centuries-long life, it does not simply die in isolation. It performs a final act of redistribution. As the tree slowly fails, its chemical signals change. It stops using its energy for growth. Instead, it reverses the flow. Research suggests that a dying tree dumps its carbon reserves, its life savings, into the fungal network. It pumps its remaining sugar and nutrients out of its own trunk and into the roots of its neighbors. It supports the trees around it, often specifically targeting its own seedlings, giving them a final, massive injection of resources to ensure their survival after it is gone. The forest does not mourn, it reinvests. The death of an individual becomes the nourishment of the community. It is a legacy written in sugar and carbon, passed down through the dark earth in a silent chemical testament to the continuity of life. We have spoken of the fungi as mere cables, passive conduits for the trees. but recent research suggests the fungi themselves may be talking. In 2022, computer scientists analyzing the electrical activity of mycelium found something startling. The fungi emit electrical spikes, rapid pulses of voltage that travel along their threads. These spikes are not random static. They cluster in trains, similar to the neural firing in a human brain. When researchers analyzed the patterns of these spikes, they found that they bore a striking mathematical resemblance to human speech. The pulses seemed to be organized into distinct words, and these words were arranged into sentences. Some species, like the split-gill fungus, have a vocabulary of up to 50 unique electrical patterns. We do not yet know what they are saying. Are they signaling the location of food? Are they coordinating their growth? Or are they negotiating the price of sugar with the trees? It opens up a dizzying possibility that the soil beneath us is humming with a language of its own, a subterranean conversation in a dialect of pure electricity. We tend to think of plants as deaf. They have no ears, no eardrums, no auditory nerves to process a melody. But sound is not just an aesthetic experience. It is a physical phenomenon. It is vibration. It is a wave of pressure traveling through the air, compressing and expanding molecules. And plants, it turns out, are incredibly sensitive biological instruments, capable of tuning into these frequencies. In the rolling vineyards of Tuscany, a strange and beautiful experiment has been unfolding for over a decade. Powerful speakers are set up among the rows of Sangiovese grapes, playing classical music, specifically Mozart, around the clock. To a skeptic, this sounds like pseudo-science or whimsy, but the results are measurable, repeatable, and profound. The vines exposed to the low-frequency vibrations of the music grow larger leaves. They ripen earlier. They are significantly more resistant to pests and diseases than their silent neighbors. This is not because the plants have a refined taste for 18th century Austrian composers. It is physics. The sound waves vibrate the plant tissue at a cellular level. It acts like a gentle, continuous massage. This vibration stimulates the flow of fluids within the xylem and phloem. More importantly, it causes the stomata, the tiny breathing pores on the underside of the leaves, to stay open longer, allowing the plant to absorb more carbon dioxide and grow faster. The plant perceives the sound not as music, but as a physical touch, a benevolent pressure that mimics the frequencies of a thriving, healthy environment, like a buzzing hive or a flowing stream. It is listening with its whole body. But plants do not just listen to music for growth, they listen for survival. For a root growing in the dark, dry earth, finding water is the single most critical task. For centuries, we assumed that roots found water by luck or by sensing the moisture gradient, simply growing from dry soil into slightly wetter soil. But recent experiments by evolutionary ecologist Monica Galliano have shown that they can find water without ever touching it. They can hear it. Gagliano placed pea seedlings in a Y-shaped maze. One path led to dry soil. The other path led to a sealed plastic pipe with water flowing inside it. The soil around the pipe was dry. There was no chemical trace of moisture leaking out. Yet the roots grew overwhelmingly toward the pipe. They ignored the silent, dry path. They were homing in on the low-frequency vibration, the subtle gurgle and hum of the water rushing through the tube. This suggests that the underground world is not a place of silence. To a root, the earth is alive with the sound of aquifers, underground streams, and the movement of fluids. They are navigating by sonar, listening for the song of the water in the deep dark, steering their growth toward the noise of life. Close your eyes for a moment and touch your nose with your finger. You can do this easily. You know exactly where your hand is and where your nose is, even without seeing them. This sense is called proprioception, body awareness. It relies on feedback from your muscles and nerves. We assume this is a trait unique to animals, but plants have it too. Consider a climbing plant or a tree branch. As it grows, it twists and turns, reacting to the wind and the light. Yet a plant rarely ties itself in knots. It knows the position of its own body in three-dimensional space. It can distinguish between touching an external object, like a support pole, and touching itself. If a tendril brushes against its own stem, it recoils. It knows not to grab hold. This requires a sophisticated internal map. The plant is constantly monitoring the tension in its cells and the angle of its growth relative to gravity. It possesses a distinct physical sense of self. It maintains a posture. When a wheat field is flattened by the wind, the stalks do not stay down. They sense their misalignment with gravity and actively, muscularly, pull themselves back upright. They are aware of their place in the world. This awareness extends to their neighbors. If you walk into a forest of certain tree species like the camphor tree or the lodgepole pine and look straight up at the canopy, you might see a phenomenon that looks like a flaw in the matrix. The tops of the trees, the crowns, do not touch. They grow right up to the edge of their neighbor's space, but they leave a distinct, empty gap of a few inches between the leaves. When you look at the sky, it looks like a giant jigsaw puzzle where the pieces have been pulled slightly apart. Ribbons of blue sky trace the outline of every single tree. This is called crown shyness. It is a display of exquisite botanical etiquette. Trees respect each other's personal space. Why do they do this? The leading theory is that it is a defense mechanism. By leaving a gap, the trees prevent the spread of leaf-eating insect larvae that cannot fly but must crawl from branch to branch. It also prevents physical damage. If the branches touched, they would thrash against each other in the wind, breaking twigs and stripping leaves. The trees sense the collision, or perhaps the shade cast by the neighbor, and inhibit their growth in that direction. It creates a river of sky, a map of boundaries drawn in the air, proving that the forest is not a chaotic tangle, but a highly organized society where individuals maintain a respectful distance. If plants can talk and listen and trade, the question naturally arises, can they also learn? This is the frontier of plant intelligence, and to answer it, we must return to the laboratory of Monica Galliano. She turned her attention to the Mimosa pudica, the sensitive plant. We all know this plant. If you brush its leaves, they instantly fold inward and droop, a rapid defense reflex to scare away insects or shake off herbivores. It is a creature of pure instinct. But Gagliano wanted to see if she could rewrite that instinct. She designed a contraption that would drop the potted mimosa plant exactly 6 inches onto a foam base. It was a sudden, jarring shock, but it was harmless. The first time the plant was dropped, it panicked. It folded its leaves instantly. The second time, it did the same. But as the experiment continued, dropping the plant again and again at regular intervals, something remarkable happened. The plant stopped closing. It had not tired, it had not run out of energy. When Galliano shook it manually, it still closed. But for the drop, it remained open. It had analyzed the data. It had realized that this specific shock, while frightening, caused no damage. It decided that closing was a waste of energy. It had learned to ignore a false alarm. But the most shocking result came later. Galliano left the plants alone in a dark room for a month. When she returned and dropped them again, they did not close. They remembered. Without a single neuron, without a hippocampus, the mimosa had stored the memory of that specific event for 40 days. It forces us to redefine what memory actually is. It is not just a function of the mind, it is a property of life, written into the chemistry of the cells. This memory is not limited to trauma, it is essential for the seasons. Have you ever wondered how a tulip or a stalk of wheat knows exactly when to flower? They do not have calendars. They rely on a process called vernalization. It is the biological memory of winter. Many plants cannot bloom unless they have experienced a prolonged period of cold. They effectively count the hours of freezing temperatures. This is a critical safety mechanism. If they bloomed during a random warm spell in January, the next frost would kill them. So they wait. They store the sensation of the cold in their epigenetic code, altering the way their DNA is packaged. They carry the winter inside them as a molecular record. Only when they have accumulated enough cold units, only when they are sure that the long night is truly over, do they release the brakes and allow the flowers to open. A cherry blossom is not just a reaction to the warmth of spring. It is a release of the memory of winter. The plant blooms because it remembers the ice. We think of sleep as a function of the brain, a time to dream and consolidate memories. But sleep is older than brains. Plants sleep too. If you watch a forest at night, you will see a transformation. As the sun sets, many trees and flowers, like the prayer plant or the silk tree, fold their leaves downward or close their petals. This phenomenon is called nyctinasty. It is not just a reaction to the dark. If you put a plant in a constantly dark room, it will still open its leaves in the morning and close them at night. It has an internal clock. This is the circadian rhythm, a biological oscillator that ticks inside every cell. During the night, the plant changes its metabolism. It switches from solar production to maintenance and repair. It conserves water. It prepares for the next day. Recent studies suggest that trees actually relax their branches at night, drooping by several centimeters as the water pressure inside them changes. The forest at night is a dormitory of resting giants, pulsing with a slow, rhythmic cycle of wakefulness and sleep that mirrors our own. Perhaps the greatest difference between us and them is not intelligence, but the perception of time itself. We live in seconds and minutes. We are obsessed with the immediate. But plants live in seasons and centuries. A bristlecone pine can live for 5,000 years. To such a being, a day is a flicker. A human lifetime is a passing cloud. This slow time allows them to perceive things we cannot. They can sense the gradual shift of the climate. They can integrate information over weeks to make a single decision about where to grow a root. Their thought process is not absent. It is just incredibly slow. If we could slow our own minds down to their pace, we might find that the plants are not static at all. We might see them as frantic, moving creatures, fighting wars and building cities in a blur of green motion. We are simply too fast to see the drama. We are hummingbirds trying to understand the life of a glacier. In the scorched deserts of Chihuahuan, Mexico, there exists a plant that has conquered the ultimate enemy, death itself. This is Selaginella lepidophylla, known as the resurrection plant. For months, even years, it sits in the dust. It looks like a ball of dry, dead twigs, a brown tumbleweed that has been utterly defeated by the sun. It is brittle to the touch. It has lost 95% of its water. By all biological definitions, it should be a corpse. But it is not dead, it is waiting. When the rare desert rain finally falls, a miracle of biological engineering takes place. As the water touches the dry ball, the plant wakes up. In a matter of hours, the brown curled limbs unfurl and turn a vibrant, deep green. The metabolic engines restart. The plant is photosynthesizing, growing, and living as if nothing happened. The secret lies in a sugar called trehalose. As the plant dries out, it replaces the water in its cells with this sugar, which hardens into a glass-like state. This biological glass freezes the cellular machinery in place, preventing the cell walls from collapsing and the proteins from unraveling. It is a state of suspended animation called anhydrobiosis, life without water. It is a form of time travel, allowing the plant to skip the bad years and live only in the good ones. In the gravel plains of the Namib Desert, survival requires a different strategy. Here, water is so scarce that any patch of green is an instant target for a thirsty animal. To survive, plants must disappear. They must become invisible. This is the genius of lithops, the living stones. These plants have evolved to look exactly, indistinguishably, like the pebbles and rocks that surround them. They are small, split into two fleshy lobes, and colored with the same grays, browns, and mottled patterns as the geology of the desert floor. They are the masters of camouflage. They bury themselves deep in the sand, exposing only their flat tops to the surface. But this creates a problem. How do they get sunlight if they are buried? The solution is architectural. The top surface of a lithops is not opaque. It is a window. It is composed of translucent cells that act as a lens. This lens filters the harsh desert sun and guides the light down into the body of the plant, deep underground, where the chlorophyll is hidden safely away. They are subterranean solar collectors, hiding in plain sight, watching the herbivores walk right over them, unaware that they are stepping on a living thing full of sweet water. From the furnace of the desert, we move to the freezer of the poles. In the high Arctic and on the fringes of Antarctica, plants face the threat of their cells being shredded by ice crystals. But the Antarctic hairgrass and certain polar lichens have evolved a chemical shield. They produce antifreeze proteins. These specialized molecules bind to the edges of forming ice crystals, stopping them from growing sharp and puncturing the delicate cell membranes. This allows them to survive temperatures that would turn a tropical plant into mouche, but their resilience goes further. These plants can photosynthesize under the snow. In the dim, blue light of the polar spring, buried under a foot of ice, they wake up. They are so efficient that they can harvest energy at temperatures just above freezing, hoarding the weak sunlight to build their biomass. They are the silent sentinels of the cold, holding the soil together against the wind, proving that life does not need warmth to thrive. It just needs liquid water and a ray of light. But perhaps the most shocking adaptation of all has been found in a place created by human failure. In 1991, 5 years after the nuclear disaster at Chernobyl, robots sent into the ruins of Reactor 4 found something growing on the walls. It was a black fungus, Cladosporium sphaerospermum. It was growing in an environment where the radiation levels were high enough to kill a human in minutes. Scientists discovered that this fungus was not just tolerating the radiation, it was eating it. The fungus is black because it is rich in melanin, the same pigment found in human skin. But here, the melanin plays a different role. It captures the high-energy gamma rays of the radiation and converts them into chemical energy. This is radiosynthesis. Just as plants use chlorophyll to turn sunlight into food, this fungus uses melanin to turn nuclear fallout into food. It suggests a terrifying resilience. Life has found a way to feed on our deadliest mistake. It opens up the possibility that life could exist in the high radiation environments of space, feeding on the cosmic rays of the void, eating the apocalypse to survive. If you travel to the Fish Lake National Forest in Utah, you will find a grove of quaking aspens that stretches for over 100 acres. To the casual hiker, it looks like a beautiful forest of 40,000 individual white-barked trees, their leaves shimmering and trembling in the wind. But this is an illusion. It is not a forest. It is a single tree. This is Pando, Latin for I spread. Every single one of those 40,000 trunks is genetically identical. They are not individuals. They are stems growing from a single colossal subterranean root system that has been spreading through the soil for an estimated 80,000 years. Pando was already ancient when humans first migrated out of Africa. It was alive during the last ice age. It has survived fires, droughts, and the rise and fall of civilizations, regenerating itself endlessly from its hidden reserves. Standing in the middle of Pando is a spiritual experience. When the wind blows, the leaves of quaking aspens make a distinct sound, a soft, rhythmic applause. Listening to it, you realize you are not hearing thousands of trees. You are hearing the voice of a single, massive living thing, a creature that weighs 6,000 tons, the heaviest known organism on Earth. It is a biological immortal, a slow-motion hive mind that has conquered death by refusing to be an individual. But today, Pando is dying. Human interference has removed the predators that ate the deer, and the exploding deer population is eating the new shoots before they can grow. The giant is shrinking, a tragedy of deep time unraveling in the span of a human lifetime. From the collective giant, we move to the solitary hermit. High in the White Mountains of California, in a landscape of dry, shattered limestone that looks more like the moon than the Earth, lives the oldest known non-clonal individual on the planet. This is the Great Basin bristlecone pine. The most famous of them is named Methuselah. Methuselah is over 4,850 years old. It was a sapling before the pyramids of Giza were built. It was already ancient when Rome fell. It looks more like driftwood than a living tree. Its trunk is twisted, gnarled, and polished by millennia of wind and sand. Large parts of it are dead wood, stripped of bark, yellow and hard as stone. Yet, a single strip of living bark connects the roots to a few green branches that still produce cones. The secret of its longevity is suffering. It lives in a place where almost nothing else can survive. The soil is alkaline and poor. The weather is brutal. But this adversity protects it. The wood grows so slowly that it becomes incredibly dense, impervious to insects and rot. Because there is no vegetation around it, fire cannot reach it. Methuselah has survived history by finding a place where history cannot touch it. Its exact location is a closely guarded secret, known only to a few forest rangers, to protect it from the vandalism of tourists. It stands alone in the high silence, a living testament to the power of endurance. Deep in the coastal redwood forests of California, amidst the towering giants that block out the sun, there exists a phenomenon that defies the rules of biology. Hidden in the deepest shade, you can sometimes find a tree that is not green, but pure spectral white. These are the albino redwoods. They are ghost trees. These trees have a genetic mutation that prevents them from producing chlorophyll. Without chlorophyll, they cannot photosynthesize. They cannot turn sunlight into food. By all the laws of botany, they should be dead. They should have withered as seedlings. Yet they grow. Some reach heights of 50 feet, glowing like pale specters in the gloom. How do they survive? They are vampires. The roots of the albino redwood are grafted onto the roots of the healthy green redwoods surrounding it. The parent tree and the neighbors are pumping sugar and nutrients into the white ghost, keeping it alive. For years, scientists thought these albinos were purely parasitic, draining the forest. But recent research suggests a more complex story. The white needles of the ghost tree contain high concentrations of heavy metals, cadmium, copper, and nickel. It appears that the albino acts as a toxic waste dump for the rest of the tree. It absorbs the poisons from the soil, sacrificing its own tissues to keep the main tree healthy. It is not a parasite, it is a martyr. It is a protected member of the community, carried by the collective strength of the forest in a relationship of strange, silent grace. If plants can remember the past, can they also predict the future? In a very real physical sense, yes. Long before the first drop of rain falls, before the thunder rolls or the sky turns grey, the forest knows what is coming. Plants are the ultimate meteorologists. They possess a structural sensitivity to atmospheric pressure and humidity that far exceeds the capabilities of our own skin. Consider the humble pine cone. It is not alive in the active metabolic sense. It is a vessel, a dead wooden structure designed to deliver seeds. Yet, even when lying on the forest floor, detached from the tree, it functions as a machine. The scales of the pine cone are built with a specific hygroscopic architecture. When the air becomes humid, signaling approaching rain, the outer cells swell and the scales shut tight. They create a waterproof vault to keep the seeds dry and viable. When the air dries out, signaling good travel weather, the scales shrink and open, releasing their cargo on the wind. It is a mechanical prediction, a shape-shifting response to the weather forecast that requires zero energy. Farmers and indigenous peoples have watched flowers like the scarlet pimpernel or the clover for millennia. These plants fold their petals and leaves hours before a storm, reacting to the subtle drop in air pressure. They are battening down the hatches, preparing for a violence that has not yet arrived, living always a few hours ahead of the present. This extreme sensitivity has caught the eye of an unlikely partner, the military. If a plant can sense a change in humidity or the chemical signature of a caterpillar, what else can it sense? Enter the era of the sentinel plant. Scientists in defense laboratories are bioengineering plants to function as silent, self-replicating spies. The focus is on the roots, because roots are constantly sampling the groundwater, drawing in fluids from a wide area. They can detect trace elements of chemicals that shouldn't be there. Researchers have modified the genetic code of plants to react to the specific molecular signature of TNT, explosives. Imagine a field of innocent-looking white flowers planted over an old, forgotten minefield. When the roots touch the faint chemical leakage of a buried landmine, the plant's internal chemistry shifts. It stops producing chlorophyll or produces a warning pigment. The leaves turn from green to white, or perhaps red. The field becomes a map of danger. The plants are doing the work of a bomb squad, standing vigil in silence, translating the hidden threats of the soil into a visual language we can understand. It is a glimpse into a future where our sensors are not made of silicon and plastic, but of leaf and vein. As we uncover the complexity of plant behavior, a disturbing and humbling thought begins to take root. We assume we are the masters of the planet. We domesticated the wheat, we cultivated the coffee, we spread the corn. But look at the results. These plants, once confined to small wild patches of the globe, now cover millions of square miles. They have convinced us to clear forests for them, to water them, to defend them against pests with our technology, and to carry their seeds to every continent on Earth. Who is really domesticating whom? Consider the chili pepper. It evolved capsaicin, the chemical that burns our mouths, specifically to repel mammals like us, who crush seeds with our teeth. It wanted to be eaten by birds, who swallow seeds whole. But humans, in our strange, masochistic desire for pain and flavor, fell in love with the toxin. We became the pepper's greatest ally. Or consider caffeine. The coffee plant produces it as a neurotoxin to paralyze insects. But in the human brain, it acts as a stimulant. We are addicted to their chemical defense. We have built a global economy around serving the needs of a shrub from Ethiopia. The plants have hacked our reward systems. They are using us as legs, using our desire and our commerce to conquer the world. We are not the farmers, we are the pollinators. Despite their power over us, we still struggle to truly see them. In psychology, this is a known cognitive bias called plant blindness. Show a human a picture of a tiger standing in a jungle, and they will stare at the tiger. They will likely not be able to describe the green wall of leaves that surrounds it. Our brains are hardwired to detect movement, faces, and immediate threats. Plants are static. They fade into the background wallpaper of our lives. This blindness is dangerous. It makes us underestimate the intelligence of the system we live in. We see a forest as a collection of lumber or a park as a place to jog. We miss the drama. We miss the communication, the war, the trade, and the memory. We are walking through a crowded room, ignoring the thousands of beings who are watching us, sensing our heat, tasting our breath, and adjusting their growth based on our shadow. We are the only ones in the forest who think we are alone. But even if our conscious minds ignore them, our bodies do not. We have a deep chemical connection to the forest. In Japan, this is known as Shinrin-yoku, or forest bathing. It is the practice of simply walking among trees. Doctors prescribe it not just for exercise, but for medicine. And the science backs them up. When we breathe the air of a forest, we are inhaling a specific class of chemicals called phytoncides. These are the essential oils of the trees, the airborne defense compounds they release to fight off rot and insects. But in the human body, these compounds boost our immune system. They lower our cortisol levels. They reduce our blood pressure. We feel calm in nature, not just because it is pretty, but because we are biochemically compatible with it. We evolved in this air. The forest is treating us. The trees are sharing their immune system with us. It is a chemical handshake, a reminder that we are not separate from the web of life. We are dependent on the breath of the plants for our very sanity. And finally, art is beginning to bridge the gap that science has opened. In galleries and forests around the world, artists and biohackers are attaching sensors to leaves and stems. These devices translate the subtle fluctuations in a plant's electromagnetic field, the biodata of its internal life, into audible sound. They are giving the plants a voice. When you listen to this plant music, it is not random noise. It has rhythm, it has melody, it changes when you touch the leaf, it shifts when the sun goes down. A fern sounds different from a cactus. A tree in a storm sings a chaotic, high-pitched song, while a flower in the morning hums a low drone. We are beginning to realize that the forest is a symphony. It is a constant, overlapping chorus of electrical signals, a song of survival that has been playing for eons, unheard by human ears until now. It is the sound of a mind that is thinking without a brain, a choir of the green world singing to the sun. What then is intelligence? For centuries, we have defined it in our own image. We look for brains, we look for neurons, for central nervous systems, for the ability to move rapidly and manipulate tools. By this narrow definition, a plant is a stone, but the forest challenges this arrogance. It suggests that intelligence is not a structure, it is a behavior. It is the ability to perceive the world, to process complex information, to solve problems, and to survive against the odds. By this truer definition, the plant kingdom is a collective genius. It solves problems that we cannot even grasp. It creates its own food from light and air, a feat of engineering we still struggle to replicate. It turns solid rock into living tissue. It survives for thousands of years without moving a single muscle. The brain of the plant is not concentrated in a vulnerable skull. It is distributed. It is everywhere, in the millions of sensitive root tips probing the dark, in the leaves reading the polarization of the light, in the chemical signals drifting on the wind. It is a network intelligence, resilient, redundant, and vast. We are the centralized thinkers, prone to failure if one part breaks. They are the distributed thinkers, capable of losing a limb, a branch, or a trunk, and simply growing another. We pity plants because they are slow. We see their immobility as a trap, but perhaps we have it backwards. Perhaps it is we who are trapped by our speed. We are the fast ones. We live in a blur of movement, burning through energy, racing against time, obsessed with the immediate gratification of the next second. We are the hummingbirds of the biosphere, vibrating with a frantic high-frequency energy that burns us out in a few decades. The plants are the slow ones. They have chosen a different relationship with time. They do not race, they accumulate. A redwood tree does not rush to reach the sky. It takes 1,000 years, building its body atom by atom, layer by layer, investing in a structure that will outlast empires. Their slowness is not a weakness, it is a strategy of endurance. They watch us scurry and fret, building our temporary cities and fighting our quick wars while they hold the ground. They are the adults of the planet, and we are the hyperactive children running around their feet, unaware that the stability of our entire world rests on their patience. Ultimately, we must realize that we are guests in their house. The atmosphere we breathe is their exhalation. The energy we burn is their stored sunlight. The medicine we take is their chemical defense. The planet breathes, and that breath is green. If you could see the Earth from space in a time lapse, you would see the seasons pulsing back and forth across the continents, a green wave of growth and retreat. This is the heartbeat of the world. It is a rhythm that has been beating since long before we stood up on two legs, and it will continue long after we lie down for the last time. We are part of this web. We are not the weavers. We are just a strand. The electrical signals in our brains are echoed by the signals in the roots. The water in our blood is the same water that travels up the xylem. We are different expressions of the same life force, separated only by the speed at which we choose to live. To understand the plant is to understand our own origins, and to recognize that silence is not an absence of life, but a different, deeper way of being alive. So, the next time you walk through a forest or even look at the houseplant sitting quietly in the corner of your room, do not see a statue, see a slow-motion animal, see a being that is sensing you, tasting the air you breathe, feeling the vibrations of your step, and perhaps, in its own chemical way, wondering what you are. You can rest now. You are surrounded by a vigilant, aware, and protective web of life. The trees are watching the night. The roots are holding the earth. The chemical conversation continues in the dark, a lullaby of atoms and signals that has never stopped. Let the slow time of the plants take over. Let your own thoughts slow down to match their rhythm. The forest is breathing, and so are you. Good night.